Stop losing worms in winter. This leaf method, well, it changes everything. Keeping worms active through winter is one of the biggest challenges for gardeners who depend on vermicompost to power their soil, but there's a surprisingly simple method, so simple that most gardeners walk past it every fall without realizing they're stepping over the solution. The humble leaf, when used the right way, becomes a natural heater, moisture regulator, food source, and microbial powerhouse that keeps your worm population thriving even as temperatures drop. This isn't theory. It's a practical, proven system that gives you living, active worm beds all winter long, and a head start on rich, dark compost in early spring. Let's dive straight into the forgotten leaf trick and how to apply it in your worm bins and raised beds for maximum winter activity and unmatched soil health. Why leaves are the hidden fuel source worms crave all winter. Leaves break down slowly, releasing carbon-rich material that worms feed on for months, but their real magic is in the way they trap heat. When you layer leaves correctly, especially slightly damp leaves, they create a warm, micro-environment that buffers worms from winter cold. The decomposition process produces gentle heat, and that warmth keeps microbial life thriving under the surface. Worms follow warmth and moisture so they stay active, eating, tunneling, and multiplying instead of shutting down for the season. Leaves are essentially a slow-release natural insulation mat combined with a food source, and no artificial bedding does it better in winter. So, how do you build a winter-ready worm bed using the leaf trick? Well, the key really is abundance. Worms don't just need a thin scattering of leaves, they need a deep, generous layer that mimics a forest floor. Begin by adding a thick base of chopped or crushed leaves, about 6 to 10 inches, directly on top of your worm bedding, raised bed soil, or outdoor worm trench. Crushing leaves helps speed decomposition and, creates more surface area for microbes to work their magic. Moisture is essential, but you want to avoid overwatering. Damp leaves should feel like a wrung-out sponge. This moisture activates fungal and bacterial life, which in turn heats the bedding naturally. Once the base layer is in place, go ahead and add your feeding layer. During winter, simple, easily digested foods work best. If you're mixing a winter microbe booster, the following formula works beautifully. Alright, let's talk about the winter worm activation mix. You'll need 2 cups of finished compost, 1 cup of worm castings, 1 cup of well-rotted manure, 2 teaspoons of molasses, and 1 gallon of non-chlorinated water. Now, stir until the mixture is evenly diluted. Then, pour this gently over the leaf layer, making sure it soaks through without turning the leaves soggy. This introduces fresh microbial activity that warms the environment and provides immediate food for your worms. After soaking the base, add another generous layer of leaves, about 4 to 6 inches, on top. This second layer is your insulation blanket. It traps warmth, slows down evaporation, and protects worms from temperature swings. Even in freezing regions, that top leaf blanket creates a stable microclimate underneath. The microbial explosion that powers winter composting is, honestly, pretty fascinating. Worms are only part of the winter composting equation. When the temperature drops, bacteria slow down, but, fungi really take the lead. Leaves naturally encourage fungal decomposition, and fungi are far more tolerant of cold weather. As fungi colonize the leaf layers, they break down tough fibers and, release heat, exactly the environment worms need. That heat plus the winter activation mix creates a thriving ecosystem even when the surface appears dormant. The worms move upward and downward through the warmed layers, consuming decomposing leaf matter, microorganisms, and any foods you add. By late winter, the bottom leaf layer will have collapsed into a dark, crumbly mix that is half digested by worms and ready to transform your spring beds. So, how does the leaf system protect worms from winter kill? Well, cold is just one threat to winter vermiculture, Moisture loss is equally dangerous, because when bedding gets too dry, worms tend to burrow deep into dormancy. But leaves, they really solve this effortlessly. Their structure holds moisture efficiently, while still allowing for some airflow. Even when frost forms right on the surface, the layers underneath actually stay soft, damp, and, well, worm-friendly. This natural insulation is what prevents those catastrophic mass escape or surface freeze events that can happen when worm beds are left exposed to dry winter winds or sudden shifts in temperature. Leaves create stability. And honestly, stability is survival. Using the leaf trick in raised beds with resident worms is a pretty smart move. You see, a lot of gardeners keep a small worm population directly inside their raised beds, especially if those beds are enriched with compost. If you want those worms to stay active all winter long, just blanket the entire bed with about 8 to 12 inches of leaves. So, you'll want to water lightly, then pour your winter activation mix across the surface before adding a final topping of leaves. Even if your top layer freezes, the biological activity below will continue. Come spring, that entire mulch layer will be pulled down into the soil by worms and microbes, leaving behind rich humus and soft aerated soil that needs almost no tilling. Why this method produces superior spring soil? Gardeners who overwinter worms with the leaf method often notice their soil improving faster than any other amendment. Leaves feed fungi, fungi feed worms, worms feed your soil. By spring, you aren't just left with leaf mold, you're left with biologically active compost that is richer in humic acids, more moisture retentive, and far more nutrient dense than anything created in warm weather. Your worms will emerge in massive numbers, already adapted to the bed, ready to accelerate your early plantings. Maintaining the system through the coldest months. Check moisture every 2 to 3 weeks. If the leaves feel dry, mist lightly, never drench. Top up with more leaves whenever the surface layer begins to collapse. If extreme cold is expected, add another 2 to 4 inches of leaves. This takes seconds but can save your worm population from freezing. The deeper the leaf blanket, the safer your worms will be.